Good morning and welcome to the September 6, 2018 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda today, there are speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so that the meeting is not disrupted. The public hearing on item number 1 of the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting, the approval of the August 23rd Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes, is hereby opened.
Motion to approve.
Galen made the motion to approve the minutes. Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Good morning. Item number 2 is 18 VA 008, a variance request to reduce the minimum required side yard setback for a detached garage from 8 feet to 3 feet. Property is located at 913 Anamosa Street on the south side across from Horace Mann, and just it's zoned low-density residential district and is part of a residential district located south of Anamosa Street. To the north is zoned public district. Aerial showing the neighborhood developed with single-family residences with some detached structures in the back. Currently, they have a shed located in the back, on the back side of the property. The applicants indicated they're going to remove that shed and be building the garage in that back area. Future land use is low-density neighborhood. You see I-190 to the west as an arterial street or entrance corridor, and then as well as or West Boulevard North as a collector street, and Anamosa Street as an minor arterial street. The survey of the property showing existing development, as I said, they've indicated they're going to be removing that shed, which is 2.2 feet from the property line, and proposing to build a 16 by 24 detached garage. They're requesting the 3 feet in order to, I believe, reduce the angle that would be needed in order to enter and exit the garage. The minimum required side yard setback is 8 feet. Two of staff's concerns. One is that Public Works Department wants at least a minimum 3-foot separation from the roof edge to the property line. So with a 3-foot setback, that would really affect that. In addition, on the adjacent property to the west, there is a shed currently located adjacent to where the proposed detached garage would be located, which has a very minimal setback. And fire department, their concern is the separation between structures on adjacent properties, and even looking at that without a lot of room between the structures with the 3-foot setback, it'd be difficult to maintain those structures. Here we're looking south into the property, 913 Anamosa Street, looking to the east along Anamosa Street, to the west. This is looking between the houses where the proposed garage would be going back by this shed, and this is the shed on the adjacent property, which also has a very small setback from the property line. Looking into the property, that back area, the applicant has indicated that the homeowner is handicapped and is requesting the variance for ease of entering the garage, getting out, getting to the house. However, staff, looking at this, there is room with some grading to put in an 8-foot setback, push it far enough back that they could meet the minimum required 8-foot side yard setback. And also due to drainage concerns as well as fire safety, staff is recommending that the variance request be denied. I do not believe the applicant is in the audience today to answer any questions. Are there any questions for staff?
Thank you, Fletcher. I don't have any up immediately, so I'm going to butt in with one. On a detached garage, the setback is 8 feet. That's the code. I thought there was a 5 foot for a detached. Am I wrong?
You are correct. However, that would require that the front of the garage be a minimum of 90 feet from the front lot line, and then you can be as close as 5 foot. In this case, they can't meet that requirement, so it's 8 foot.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I may continue.
Sure, Vicki.
So we certainly can appreciate that because of the disability of the property owner, that there may need to be some compromise made. The concern is, though, that we've got drainage between the shed on the adjacent property and the proposed structure on this property. And we've got an existing structure that causes some fire concern with the fire department by reducing that setback. In visiting with the fire department before the meeting, Fletcher identified that if a 5 foot setback, which would be what we would see in other instances if it were a shed, that did meet the 90 foot setback requirement from the front lot line, that would be the most we would want to see compromised. And that would then secure some separation between this structure and the shed on the adjacent property. The fire department would want a stipulation added that the property owner must coordinate with the fire department to identify the building materials for that wall to ensure that we've got that fire separation. And the public works staff has identified that the roof line should not be more than, it should be a minimum of 3 foot from that adjacent property line to ensure that there is room for drainage. So if it is your desire to grant the variance, citing the special circumstances created by the disability of the occupant of the property, then we would want those 2 stipulations added.
Thanks, Vicki. Galen.
Yeah, that was, Eric stole my question. That was what I was going to ask too. It's about that 90 foot from the front, and then you can be 5 feet. And I think that's what I was thinking heading into this is let's make it 5 feet just because that's tends to align with the spirit of the ordinance and would allow for the things that you just talked about, the roof line. So I'll see if anybody else agrees with that, but that's what I would, how I would be leaning right now is give it a 5 foot instead of a 3 foot.
Other questions or comments from the commission on this one? Not seeing any lights up. Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would agree with Galen. This is an older neighborhood, and as long as, someday somebody else will own that property, and as long as it's still meeting some requirements that will provide safety, I would agree with that. And so if somebody would like to make a motion, I don't know exactly, but, could the fire department talk? That would be great.
Yeah, Tim.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to add on, Vicki did a great job of identifying our concerns and what what would be acceptable to us. If you make as part of the motion, if you'd identify that limited or non-combustible materials be utilized on that property line wall to help us out with that separation. As you know, anytime we have buildings that are in close proximity or reduced setbacks, we have an increased risk of a fire event propagating from one property to the next, which creates huge issues for us and the property owners overall from a life safety standpoint. So if we can get that little added piece in there for materials that would be less combustible, that'd be great. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Mike?
Now, as I understood, there was a drainage problem. Does that solve the drainage problem also, that there's no conflict with the drainage if we do the 5 foot?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
So the second stipulation that you may want to add on addresses the drainage, which would be that the roof line be a minimum of 3 foot from the adjacent property line to ensure adequate room for drainage, and that would address the drainage issue.
So with that said, I would recommend that we add that on.
Well, I don't have a motion yet. Are you willing to make one?
I would make that motion.
Okay.
That we, as per stated, we have the 5-foot setback with the fire marshal's recommendations and the drainage taken care of.
Mr. Chair,
David,
Yes,
however.
Vicki.
if I might, so if it's my understanding, motion maker, that you are stating that it is your desire to grant the variance to reduce the side yard setback from 8 foot to 5 foot with the stipulations that the building material on the west side of the garage be limited or non-combustible, be of non-combustible materials, and that a minimum 3-foot setback to the roof line be maintained to ensure an area for drainage.
Sounds great.
Okay. Mike made the motion as Vicky stated, or helped to state, and Galen seconded that motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Vicky.
could we have the motion maker cite the reasons for granting the variance? And I think Galen gave you some great ideas. And in his discussion, he noted that it was keeping with the spirit of the ordinance because other accessory structures that set back a minimum of 90 feet may have a 5-foot setback, and there is a special circumstance that is acknowledged by the law that when someone is disabled, that there needs to be some consideration in the strict application of the ordinance.
Can that be as recorded as Vicky stated?
Mike liked the way Vicky stated it and agreed with it fully.
Correct.
And I think
Agreed.
Galen made the motion in the same spirit, or the second in the same spirit. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion as Vicky helped to state? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Look for a motion to adjourn the zoning board of adjustment. Rachel made the motion and Karen seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That moves us now to the Planning Commission meeting for September 6, 2018. Again, if you would like to speak on an item on the Planning Commission agenda, please fill out a speaker request form and hand it to the staff along the left wall. And same request on cell phones. If anybody new is here, please turn your cell phone to silent or turn it off. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway. Items 1 through 10 on the Planning Commission agenda have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this Planning Commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following item. Item 7, 18 UR 009. The Rapid City Planning Commission's action on this item is final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following the Planning Commission. Are there items 1 through 10 that staff would like removed?
Yes, items 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Any items that Planning Commission would like removed other than those? Okay. Any other items? And then any items that, I guess we're down to 1, 8, and 10. Would anybody in the audience like to remove one of those? Oh, 6 as well. So then we look for a motion from the commission on approving items 1, 6, 8, and 10 per staff recommendation.
So moved.
Galen made the motion to approve those per staff recommendation, and Mike Quasney seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.
Good morning, Sarah Hansel, Division of Long Range Planning. Item number 2 is the annexation of the Prairie Acres Mobile Home Park. This is an annexation which requires approval by the Pennington County Commissioners. They convened on Tuesday morning to review the item and had a tie vote, which continues the item to their next meeting. So the city is not able to take further action on this until the Pennington County Commissioners review that item. So we are requesting a continuation for item 2 to the September 20th Planning Commission meeting and a continuation of item 3 to October 25th.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Vicki?
for further explanation, at our last meeting, we discussed continued items and the requirement to republish and notice, and a rezone would require additional notification that would prevent us from continuing them concurrently. Therefore, there's a separation in the meeting dates.
Okay. What was this? Well, we'll start with item 2. I'd look for a motion to continue that to September 20th. Oh, I'm sorry, and Galen has a question on this one.
Maybe I missed that. Can you clarify, Pennington County voted to tie, so they need to pass this before we can act on it? Or are they, is it on their next agenda to vote on this again, or?
Yes, it's on their next agenda, which is in 2 weeks.
Okay.
They need to review this annexation because it is a involuntary annexation procedure, and it's unplatted. So by state law, the Pennington County Commissioners have to approve the annexation.
Okay. So would it make sense just to wait until they have it approved and then put it on agenda rather than put a date on it right now when we don't know if it's going to happen?
You know, we're trying to follow, there's a strict timeline in state law of the amount of time that can pass between when the council adopts a resolution of intent to annex and when they adopt a resolution of annexation. So we're trying to keep our timeline as tight as possible.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vicki?
That's a great question, Galen, and once an item is on an agenda, we have to continue it to a date-specific meeting. We couldn't just say continue it until the county takes action, so therefore we had to pick a date that we thought was reasonable.
Karen made the motion to continue this till the 20th. I missed who seconded it. Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. Any further discussion on this one? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item number 3, the requested date, Sarah, was the 23rd on that one? October
25th.
25th, okay. Is there a motion to continue that one? Karen, all right. And Mike seconded it. Okay, Karen made the motion to continue to October 25th, and Mike seconded that motion again. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4.
Thank you. And if I could, I'd like to speak to item 4 and 5. Item 4 is a preliminary subdivision plan that was submitted concurrently with the rezoning application for the same property. Item number 4 is a preliminary subdivision plan to divide a 9.3 acre parcel into 2 separate lots. It was submitted concurrently with a rezoning application to rezone from general agricultural district to medium density residential district. Current zoning for the property shows general agricultural district. The property is located just east of Valley Drive in the proposed Diamond View subdivision. This is an aerial view of the property. As I mentioned, it is 9.3 acres in size, and the applicant has proposed to divide this existing parcel into a 5.57 acre parcel and a 3.81 acre parcel. Future land use for the neighborhood shows urban neighborhood, medium density residential district, which is what the rezoning application was submitted for from general ag to MDR. MDR is a identified district within the urban neighborhood future land use category. Valley Drive is a collector street. Currently, it has 21 feet of pavement. It will have to be built to collector street design standards upon approval of the preliminary subdivision plan. And this is just an overview of the parcel. The southern parcel is the 5.57 acre parcel, and the 3.81 acre parcel is to the north. The master plan for the area shows this as phase 2 of what was submitted. So this is for primarily multifamily residential. As development occurs later on with the neighborhood, Homestead Street will be constructed to meet Valley Drive, where an exception may be obtained. And I was able to take some site photos. This is just a view to the east looking at the property on the southern edge. Looking to the northeast, looking north along Valley Drive, the neighborhood is part of the Rapid Valley Sanitary District. Looking back to the east across the road, or excuse me, to the west at the existing neighborhood, and then back to the south along Valley Drive. That's just looking to the southwest at the rest of the property. And with that, staff would support the approval of the preliminary subdivision plan and the concurrent rezoning application. I'd be happy to take any questions. And I also understand that there are some members of the audience that would have questions on the applications as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vicki.
Just for added clarity, so as you guys have heard me say before, the preliminary subdivision plan is the what if. If we were to plat, what would we be required to do? And you'll see that in John's report, there are numerous stipulations of approval. It looks like there's 13. And one of them addresses Valley Drive. As John noted, that is a collector street. So as this comes forward, the applicant will either have to bring in construction plans showing that improvement or seek a variance that would be reviewed by the public works staff and potentially by council if the decision of staff wasn't of the approval of the applicant. At such time as they come in for a building permit for the multifamily development, I think John did a good job explaining that the medium density residential on these two large lots would allow for multifamily development. And even in the master plan that was presented by the property owner, it appears that that would be what they would want to do on this property. There is a provision within our infrastructure design criteria manual that will require that if they do multifamily development and it equals or exceeds 150 dwelling units, then they have to bring in a traffic impact study to determine what street improvements would be needed to service the traffic generated by this development. And at this time, we don't know what that density may be, but even if it isn't in a planned development, just getting a building permit would trigger that traffic impact study if it meets or exceeds that number.
Thanks, Vicki. John?
What portion of the road are we talking about?
So as a part of the plat, it is required that they improve that part of the road that is adjacent to the property. But if it does trigger a traffic impact study and it's determined that there needs to be other turn lanes at intersecting streets off-site, then that could be something that would be required at that time. But again, this plat is just the what if, and we would have to look at that once we had more information as to what the applicant is proposing.
So adjacent property owners would be assessed?
No, this would be the requirement of the developer, or again, he could seek an exception. And that's the way the stipulation is written.
Is this only the street that's adjacent to their property line?
Correct.
So what about the rest of it?
Again, plating doesn't require that they improve right-of-way outside of that area that abuts the property unless the development triggers a traffic impact study, and the traffic impact study calls out that there needs to be off-site improvements.
Thank you.
I don't have any other lights up. We have a couple speaker request forms that I'll go to now. Larry Kane, if you'd like to speak to this item. And we just ask, as you start your remarks, if you can identify your name and address for the record, and we'll go from there.
My name is Larry Kane. I live at 1049 Valley Drive, directly across from this issue here. The biggest thing we're having problems with now is you're adding more to our problems, which is higher taxes that we don't need, running drain runoff that we don't have, and various things like that, and lack of police protection. I called the police department once and they never showed up. There's a lot more issues than putting houses in across the street from us than there is building new. We don't need new taxes. We don't need these apartments. We have young people now who think this is a speed strip down through there, and they do as much as 80 miles an hour. It's a 25-mile-an-hour road. If the police department won't show up, what do you think is going to move into those apartments? 90% of the people that live up in that area are retired or retired age. We don't need more kids blazing up and down that street. And this is not bringing an issue. This issue is never assessed by anybody except a special interest group that doesn't even take into condition and doesn't even take into consideration what's actually there. We don't need more hot rods up and down the street doing 100 miles an hour. And that's all it's going to do. The police department don't show up now, why should they show up later? We have issues, we have had issues before with people who don't want to obey the law. And I've taken it upon myself to make sure these people quit doing that by taking down their license plate number, their address and everything else, and we had them kicked out of the area. We don't want more race cars up and down that road. I mean, people got to be responsible for the speed limit that's on that road. You put apartment buildings in there, and these people are going to be 20 years old. They don't care. The attitude of kids nowadays don't care about anything. We're trying to make it safe for everybody who's up there. There are no curb and gutter. There are no places for the kids to walk up and down that street if they want to. And people who do walk down that street to go to the store are on the road. We don't have the primary protection from the city, who said they weren't going to annex us and did. We don't have their protection. So why should we accept a special interest group coming in and making money when the city won't even protect us? That's all I got to say.
Thank you. We also have, and I apologize on the last name if I get it wrong, Ron Rube. Please correct me if I...
I guess, first of all, I need to apologize because I've never done this before, so if my etiquette's not very good, I'm sorry.
Won't worry about it, but I do need, if you can say your name and address.
My name is Ron Reeb. I live at 839 Glenside, and I also have a home at 1171 Valley Drive, which is right across the southern end of this development. I've lived on that hill most of my life, and I know development is coming. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. But the gentleman that just spoke is very true. I even have a school bus that pulls right in front of my house to load and unload kids every day, a couple of them. The traffic up there, people have no clue what the speed limit is. I've tried to slow some of them down myself, and it just doesn't work. The road up there is horrible, you know, and if you start putting more traffic, I really am concerned what they're going to do with the road. There's a pretty steep hill that gets up there. Are they going to continue that road on up through towards Anamosa when they put that across? Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to have that problem? Who's going to do that? Because, you know, the traffic is going to be just 100 times more than it is now. And it is, I have a very strong concern, this being a residential area, is putting in apartments. First of all, the amount of people and traffic, children's safety, adult safeties. I think there's better places to put large apartment complexes than in a small residential area. You know, I just think it's a very unsafe, unfair place to put that. Single-family homes is what should be there, I think. I think that's a very, and like he was saying, nobody cares up there. Nobody has cared on South Valley Drive for a long time. But the law enforcement and stuff, that's just, and the city, that's just kind of, well, they're, you know, we was called the donut hole for years. And that's still the way they feel about it. Even though we're annexed, nothing's happened except our taxes go up. No additional, the fire department and so forth, we've really never had any issues, and so I have no problem with that because they seem to be good, you know. And Rapid Valley Fire Department and the Pennington County Sheriffs, before we was taken in, did a better job than what the city's doing, to be honest with you. There's just absolutely no concern or control for that area. And as he said, people want to come in and just put in these big apartment complexes and everything else, which just totally adds to the problem of the area. It doesn't solve a thing. There's places where they put these complexes before, and in my opinion, ruins the whole area because you've got, people put these nice homes all around and they put these great big monster apartment buildings right in the middle of them, which, in my opinion, probably ruins their value of their property, but raises taxes. You know, who wants to look out their home and see a 3-story apartment building across the street? You know, if they're going to put apartment buildings in like that, then they should put them someplace where they should be. And I think it's, I just don't think the city is looking ahead or taking into consideration the people that are around that property. You know, I don't know where you people live, but would you like to live right in the middle of a bunch of 3-story apartments on a busy street that you can't, that no one's safe on? That's not right. It's just not right, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's everybody up and down that street that feels the same way, that are citizens. And you know, I understand the development's coming, but why don't they make them, you know, single-family homes? That would be an area that would be conducive to that. And if they're going to try and move and develop that whole thing and have most of that traffic come down that one road, which is in poor shape now, and they don't seem to want to do anything with it, what's it going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, before they get it all developed where they got other ways to get in and out? And that's going to be the most common way anyway, because it goes directly down to Highway 44. You know, it's the closest way out. So the traffic is going to be horrendous, especially if you put apartment buildings in there and so forth. And the safety, the congestion, and I don't think it's going to, they're going to improve it that much. That road, you know, like I say, it has that big hill. Are they going to do anything with that? Are they going to continue that road on out the other end where it comes out, you know, up in the Menards area, Anamosa Street, so they have more ways to get out? You know what I mean? So they can at least diversify that traffic. Are they going to do those roads further up than that development? There's not much up there now, but there will be. And I think that's a very major concern for a lot of the people that have lived here for a long, long time in that area. And I just see a real problem for a residential area for people that has homes in that area, would like to have homes, because that's a residential area, not a big apartment complex area. There's areas that they can do that without causing, it's going to cause way more problems than it's ever going to solve, you know. And like he said, these special interest group stuff, they've got the money to put that stuff in, but they've also got other areas they can put them in. And I know people that have real nice homes right next door. They put in these huge apartment complexes and ruins the whole neighborhood, where it should be a family neighborhood, not a transient neighborhood. So the big concerns is the apartments, the traffic, and the roads, you know, because a lot of kids are up on that road. Like the gentleman said, the traffic's is horrible. rarely see a police officer up there unless there's a problem. And like every neighborhood, there's problems. It is getting better and it is improving, but I don't think it's going to get any better when they do that, except for whoever's doing it. And I've actually called business and people to slow their people down, and helped a little bit, but there's people that go up and down that road that I've almost got hit several times, you know, because they're just idiots. But I have a real problem with trying to get that traffic under control, and I have a real problem with, I understand that would be a great place for, you know, single-family homes, stuff like that. It's a beautiful area. But I don't think that's a place they should put in big apartment complexes. I think that would be a real mistake.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Rachel.
Well, before I jump in, do we have any more speaker request forms?
That's
Nope.
it
Okay.
for...
I just didn't want to jump ahead of someone. So it sounds, just kind of as a summary of what I've heard you guys say, there are concerns about the speed of traffic, about people just kind of running through your neighborhood without paying attention to safety. I can relate to that. I have that in my own neighborhood. We recently got sidewalks, so, you know, I can, and I have children, so this is, you know, something that is very important to me, and something I feel deeply about. So I think those comments are really important for when we get beyond the preliminary design process, because those, you know, comments will come into play, and hopefully people will pay attention to that in the requirements put upon the developers when they design. So we don't really know what's going to go up there. As far as I know, I didn't see anything saying apartment complexes. It could be townhomes. It could be, you know, duplexes, because we're looking at medium density, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so we don't really know what's going to go up there. I also have townhomes that are in my neighborhood. They were built after we moved in. They're 3-story. They're pretty huge, but they're pretty nice. So I just want to say that I really appreciate you guys coming forward and saying that traffic is an issue, that the speed is an issue, because I think that will really be important when we get to the next stage of this.
Mike?
Do we have a time frame for Homestead, Cadillac? I'm assuming we have no time frame when they will connect to this road, because they are eventually going to connect, as is shown in the one map. So those are already going to cause traffic to increase. The residential, if they do put these apartments in, at that point, they will look at the road, so the road will go in before the apartments would go in. And I guess these are questions for staff.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Vicki?
if we could get John to put the master plan back up. So the Phase 2, as John identified in his presentation, are the 2 lots that we're talking about. And you can see that it's noted on there that they are anticipating it will be multifamily development. So that lends us to believe that these will be apartments. So looking at that, you can see road connectivity to the north and also to the east that would then create more than one point of access. Currently, there are 91 residential lots that take access off of Valley Drive that has one way in and one way out. You'll note that as one of the stipulations in the staff report for the plat, we identify that you cannot have more than 40 dwelling units with one point of access. So there is an exception that they would need to secure to add 2 more lots onto the 91 that currently exist. That exception will be considered by the city council, because they're the only ones that can grant exceptions to the 40-unit rule. So I'm glad that Jason's here today, and he's hearing the testimony of the neighborhood. Certainly, when we look at any future development on these 2 lots exclusively, if it does trigger the traffic impact study, and based on the size of the lots, that very well could be the case, then we would look to see, can improvements on Valley Drive address the traffic, or do we need to have that second point of access before it goes forward? There is an area shown in green that just says future phases. That is fine. They're submitted the master plan for the balance. It shows the road connectivity that supports that they have considered street and utility corridors, and they're not landlocking themselves with this first phase of the development. However, as far as when they bring that in, it will depend upon whether or not they get the exception to allow more than 40 dwelling units with one point of access, and then it'll depend upon their own construction and development calendar as to when that would come in. There's no requirement that they plat the balance within a specific length of time. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, it does. The other question that was brought up was the Anamosa connection. Is there any planning, and I don't remember seeing this in the road plans, we've done some very good things where we're looking at that, and that would allow the second access point.
Morning, Kip Harrington, Long Range Planning. As you can see on this major street plan display, that it actually doesn't show on here, but Anamosa is to the north, and this Valley Drive will connect up. You can see it's a proposed collector up here, and it will continue up to Anamosa as development occurs. Again, there's no time frame for that. It's strictly development driven, but that will occur at some point in the future.
One of the mistakes we sometimes make is we do that a little bit too late, and if we put as many houses as are being proposed for there, I could understand the residents' concern that we don't take care of it before it becomes a problem, that they're dealing with the problem as beforehand. And so that's something that I think that we could do better at and make sure that that's taken care of before and not after the problem occurs.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vicki?
So again, the preliminary subdivision plan is a what if. If I plat, what would I need to do? And the conversation that we're having today, speaking about points of access, accommodating traffic, they're in there in those stipulations. So the applicant will, as they go forward, need to bring in these construction plans, creating a second point of access, or seek an exception to allow more than 40 dwelling units with one point of access. In addition, Valley Drive would have to be constructed to Collector Street standards as it abuts the property, with potentially additional improvements at South Dakota Highway 44 if it would require additional turn lanes, et cetera. So as this goes forward and those exceptions come in or the construction plans come in, then they'll follow those avenues of review, potentially ending up in front of council for their consideration.
And I guess my last statement that I'd like to make is that I understand your concern as you put apartment buildings across, but there are multiple areas in this town where we've done that, and it's just something that's going to happen. It's in our master plan. It's the way that we have committed to mixing these, and it's not abnormal for this to happen. If you look around town, we've done it in multiple places, and may not like it, but it's just part of the master plan as we go forward. So,
Unfortunately, we've got to keep all the comments from the microphone, just so we have it on record. Thank you. Public Works, Todd.
Just for clarification, a couple weeks ago there was a exception submitted for Valley Drive, and that just went through council on Tuesday, I believe, and council approved it to not make improvements to Valley Drive. So I know that's been discussed here about future improvements and plans for that, but that exception was approved this week.
And Todd, is that connected to this application or?
Yes,
okay.
it was to meet one of these stipulations.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vicki.
Just to expand upon that comment, so that will require that the exception to the 40-unit rule that will go before the council when that one is submitted, and I don't believe we've received that one yet. So again, it's great that we have a city council member as a liaison sitting here. Thank you, Jason, for being here. It's something for you to remember and consider as you're looking at whether or not it's appropriate to grant an exception. One point of clarification on that, the 40-unit rule was basically created to ensure that we didn't have too many residences with one point of access in case of an emergency such as a fire. If the apartment development comes in all likelihood, that will be fire sprinklered. So they will address the fire concern for any future development for those structures. But certainly, the number of dwelling units with one point of access is something that the City Council will have to labor over, knowing that they have granted the exception to not improve Valley Drive.
Kurt?
Yeah, and I can certainly understand the, you know, the existing property owners' concerns over, you know, traffic and tall buildings and you know, things that are going to happen in this beautiful vacant lot that's been across the street from you for forever, basically. You know, but there is a process that we're going through right now that, you know, has to be approval. There has to be certain things constructed and designed prior to anything happening there. So, but it's just an age-old comment that we hear, you know, quite a bit. I can remember, you know, when Walmart went on the south side, you know, all the residents, you know, just were up in arms because they were told that that was never going to be developed. Well, the only way you can really stop it is if you own that property. You know, as long as the developer is meeting all the requirements, and you know, the city is confident that it's going to be safe, that it's going to be constructed properly, and all those things taken into consideration, traffic impact studies showing what improvements need to be made. You know, I really don't think we can stop that development. You know, right now it's currently zoned agriculture, and they're looking for the rezone according to the future land use plan and the comprehensive plan to change it to urban neighborhood. I believe when the comprehensive plan was being developed, that it was publicly advertised, and all the property owners should have had input into that comprehensive plan, and it went through all the approval process to make it that way. So that part has not changed since they've brought in the comp plan. These developers are trying to comply with the comp plan, and you know, I do sympathize with you, and I think it's great that you're bringing this up and you're concerned and you're bringing it forward to and you know, screaming foul. And you know, I can appreciate that. Your voice is heard, and I'm sure when, you know, when we approve this, and if council is going to grant exceptions, you guys need to go and really fight any exceptions that are going to come, because that's the voice you have. And you know, it might seem like a big steamroller going through and just running over you guys, but your voices are heard. But you know, we can't really stop what's happening as long as they're meeting all the requirements. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Kurt. Rachel?
I just want to go back to these exceptions real quick, Todd. I'm glad that you brought that up, and I don't know if this question is for Todd or for Vicki, but so as I understand it, the exceptions were to the that were granted by City Council were for the current phase of development only, and it's only for things like curb and gutter and sidewalk. Is my understanding correct?
Correct, for widening the pavement and curb and gutter for Valley Drive adjacent to those two lots.
Okay, so you know, we saw that there were multiple phases of development. When there's an additional phase of development, they may still be required, to get the exception for the 40 points, okay, for the points of access, okay. Yeah, because sidewalks are a big deal to me, curb and gutter, that's more of a drainage thing. But I think it's really important that we try to reduce, congestion as much as possible. Although it's not great, but as a transportation engineer, I have to point out that congestion actually lowers speeds. So I guess silver lining. But I would be really hesitant to move forward on this if I thought that they were going to build something here and they wouldn't be required to put in another point of access. I think that's extremely important, and I hope City Council hears that from you guys, that they need to allow for another point of access so that you guys don't all come in and out on North Valley Drive. So, thank you.
John?
I'm curious, where does Valley Drive sit right now on the road improvement schedule for the future?
Are you talking about the existing infrastructure as it sits today?
We have a 5-year plan that we budget for, and if this is not in our 5-year plan, so it's off in the future as far as any reconstruction type work.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vicki?
You folks recently approved a preliminary subdivision plan, and it's subsequently been final platted, known as Market Square subdivision, and that's over by the Family Thrift Store off of St. Patrick Street. The requirement there was that they make improvements to Creek Drive or get exceptions, and since that plat, there has been some ongoing discussions with members of council and developers as to what is the responsibility of a developer on these existing platted streets that are currently substandard. Should it be completely up to them to make that improvement to whatever standard of classification the road is identified as, or should there be a joint effort where everyone pays their fair share? And I think that one of the considerations that council gave to the exception at City Council Tuesday night was that there may be some changes in the procedure where if someone comes in to plat adjacent to a street like Valley Drive, that it's a shared expense. It's not just completely on this developer. And the city would probably have to contribute something towards that improvement as well, because it is really a neighborhood community improvement.
Thanks, Vicki. Karen?
No.
Oh, John, sorry.
What I don't understand is requiring somebody to bring it up to standards for the type of street it is, curb gutter, sidewalks, street lights, everything, for what, 1,000, 1,500 feet? And then it, funnels back into what it is at both ends of it. I don't know why we do this. I don't know why this city does that. Why don't you just take the step and say, yeah, we're going to improve this road? And instead of coming out with a plan that says, this is when we think we need to do this, when you see the development going, why don't we work on it now, get it done?
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
So if we just had all the money we could possibly need sitting in reserves, that would be fantastic. If we required the developers to do a mile or so of street improvements to connect to a major arterial street for their development, we probably would shut down a lot of development in Rapid City. The other tool, though, we have in our toolbox is that traffic impact study. And in all likelihood, the future development on this lot is going to trigger that. Now, if that traffic impact study says you need to have another lane of traffic, you need to have a turn lane, et cetera, at these locations, then we can go off-site and we can ensure that we're getting those turning movements accommodated because of the traffic that is existing today and is being generated by this proposed use. So we'll probably come back and look at Valley Drive one more time before we issue a building permit for this property. But again, just for the purposes of platting and rezoning, the two items that are on the table today, there isn't a requirement that they would go beyond the boundary of the property.
Thanks, Vicki. Karen?
Thank you. Vicki, just to follow up on that, so if they've got an exception to not have to, make the improvements today, if the traffic impact study, if there was one, and it came back and said they need to make certain improvements, is that going to supersede what the council did?
So there's two ifs there. If the development that they're proposing triggers a traffic impact study, which would be 150 apartment units, and if the traffic impact study said these improvements are needed to accommodate the traffic and turning movements, then yes, we could require that before issuing that building permit.
Okay, thank you. The other question I'll have of staff again is there isn't anybody who wants to have an apartment in their neighborhood. Not one. And I was on the other side of the fence, just like these folks out here fighting against having apartments in my neighborhood, which didn't help because it's a land issue, and if you own the land, you really have certain rights of what you can and can't do on your property. So that's a tough call when you're a citizen out there trying to fight the development, and development is going to occur in this community. That's how the community grows. But I think in the past we have gone along with that, and we've seen apartments go throughout the city, and we don't want them all in one spot. I mean, nobody wants to have all the apartments and it doesn't work anyway for people who are trying to move around the city and work in different places. But of all the apartments that go in there, I think it's the height of apartments that really bothers most people, because you have homes and then right across the street you have a 3-story apartment building. And that really is, to me, the part that is disturbing for a neighborhood. Is there a way that we can make the platting, well, this is the preliminary subdivision plan, but when we do the rezone, is there a way that we can control some of that height other than saying putting a plan development together for that area? And if we do that, does that even allow us to control the height?
Vicki?
So you cannot add a stipulation on a rezone. It's either approve or deny. Short of saying we approve in conjunction with the plan development designation, but even if you do, and they come in with a initial and final plan development so that you and the neighborhood sees the specific layout, it would be very difficult for you to deny anything that doesn't meet the underlying zoning. That we could be challenged in a court of law, and I'll defer to Wade, but typically we don't win those. So short of doing an ordinance amendment that would reduce the allowable height in our residential districts, a single-family home or an apartment building can be 3 stories, and we do have some 2.5-story to 3-story single-family homes in our city.
Yeah, that was kind of what I thought the answer would be, but I wanted folks to understand, how hard it is for us up here to listen to the concerns and not have the ability to make any changes that would allow something like that to occur. And I don't, it's something that in the future it would be nice to be able to do that, but it's a tough call for everybody. And I think the main thing I want to make sure is that the developers do understand how citizens feel about things like the 3-story apartments. And if they're going to do something, it's, when you see apartments that go in that are not, or that blend in with the surrounding, that makes a difference. And I think people wouldn't be so outraged if they didn't see something that blended in better with their neighborhood. So thank you, Vicki.
Councilman Solomon?
Thank you for letting me chime in. I heard a lot of reference to city council. I thought I'd clarify a couple things. I thought Vicki did a great job summarizing why the exception was made on Tuesday night. And it's because of an ongoing issue we have in many parts of the city with regards to, for developing an unplatted area adjacent to an area that's already been developed, who pays for the road improvements? That's curb, sidewalk, the whole deal for both sides of the road. And should it be the developer only? Should it be the city? Should it be the developer? And those who live on the other side, there be an assessment? And so that ongoing conversation between the development community and the city has to happen, and has been going on, and it still has to happen, so that we know what's fair. Is it fair that a developer will pay for the entire road? Or, as you said, I thought that was a great point. Do you just pay for this one section, yet all around it is not improved? And what comes out of our CIP plan, which is a 5-year plan, which the traffic impact study will greatly impact. So if there's a lot of folks on this road, that priority for Valley Drive will go up and get on our plan for improvements all the way around that will better the entire community. And so it's really a question of fairness. It's an unanswered question at this time. I think that these are growth pains that we have, and we're running into this, and it's a conversation we're having, and I know the staff and development community are looking at it at the urging of the council because it's a question of fairness. And in terms of secondary points of access, I sure hope they do. You look at, I just know in my area, Chapel Valley has one point of access. It makes me nervous. I live in a part of town that we technically have more than two, but it still makes me nervous as we get more and more development and put more people into kind of a, funneling out of one particular access point. So I certainly hope the developers will seriously consider a second point of access to ease the load on the traffic that will ease the impact on your neighborhood, but also for the safety. That's the most important thing is just the safety. If there was something wrong and all of that, and I think that's a goal we want to have. We don't want any more choke points in Rapid City. So just wanted to clarify, Tuesday night, we just dealt with this issue alone. We didn't deal with the entire development itself, but that's why that decision was made, to be consistent with previous decisions that we're making as the conversations are going. Once we have policy on that will guide all of our future decisions from there. And so I just wanted to chime in. I hear the conversation. It's really good. But just kept hearing council brought up. I thought I'd better speak on our behalf. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric.
Thank you. When you look at the master plan and you see all the additional phases that are going in, what triggers a traffic impact study? And if they just do it in small increments that may not, warrant a traffic impact study, I mean, we're looking at a substantial number of individual homes and units in here. So what is it? Are we looking long-term at probably getting a traffic impact study based on their future plans, or just this small little segment of the land that's going to be developed?
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So that's one of the requirements why we require that a master plan be submitted, is so we can look at the big picture and not just see this piecemeal and look at them separately each time. So we'll look at it cumulatively, where if they meet or exceed the 150 residential lots or dwelling units, it's going to trigger that traffic impact study. And let's say that this phase that we're considering today has an apartment development of 150 or more units. When that traffic engineer brings that data to us, they will have to consider the traffic as proposed and generated by the master plan, not just this phase and the existing. They have to look at the balance of the property and what traffic it would generate too. That is a great comment. Infrastructure Design Criteria Manual states that the developer is responsible for a traffic impact study when these two things are met, and one lends itself to commercial development and industrial development. For residential, it's 150 dwelling units. We could not require a traffic impact study if they don't meet or exceed it. Again, I don't think that will be an issue. I think they will need to do one with this based on the acreage of the medium density residential that's before you today.
Mr. Kane, do you have additional comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been an accurate assessment of that road anyway. The level of that road is approximately 15 feet higher than my property at the very back end. all the water that runs down off that road runs onto my property, not onto your street. So why am I assessed something that's your fault? I have never seen anybody down there except to come and run lines and whatever else, put things in that nobody ever asked us about. And then if they did ask us, it didn't matter anyway. When are they going to do an actual assessment of that road? That road, I can go out there and come back to my house, and I can look at the road level as this high to me. So how am I responsible for runoff when the runoff comes down my driveway into my garage? This is part of the same thing that goes on with government.
I've got to ask you to confine it to this issue.
It is.
I'm going to tell you
the same
that
issue here because it refers to this road here, wanting to put curb and gutter in.
I know, but I also
It's not
live
gonna
on a
work.
property that doesn't create stormwater, and I pay the stormwater tax just like you.
I understand that, but
It's
my
just
water
life.
runs off to another property, so how is that affecting this?
Yeah.
It's the same thing that goes on up and down that road anyway. Nobody cares. It's just a place.
Well, I guess I would urge you on the bigger picture regarding the lack of attention and that you feel you're getting for the taxes paid. Unfortunately, we don't direct any city services at the Planning Commission.
Well,
I'll throw Councilman Solomon under the bus here, but the City Council is the one to ask, those questions too. We can't
Well,
tell the police department to go out
this is
there.
the information you people need to know is that we're
And-
not getting the right kind of attention.
Thank
It
you.
never is. We're just a dead-end road. Nobody cares about dead-end roads, except for the fact it's almost a quarter mile straight of speed trials.
Thank you.
25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign down at the bottom of the hill, this big. You can't miss that. 25 miles an hour is not 80.
Yeah. I wish there was something we could do about that, but we have no control over traffic control at this board level.
It's all
We're
part of the
hearing the
city.
comments for sure. Galen?
Yeah, I think, again, echo the comments. We appreciate you guys coming in, and we are, taking this into consideration. And we do need to get some action on this. I'm still not real comfortable with this, given the exception and the traffic impact study, which, Vicki, you say only triggers at 150. So let's say they come in, again, what if they come in at 120? I think that's still a huge impact on Valley Drive, and I wouldn't feel comfortable letting them put 120 units and then having in the back pocket, the exception to not improve Valley Drive. So can you, give me that scenario? What if they come in and show 120 apartment units? They have got the exception, they don't have to improve Valley Drive. I don't like that at all. That's why I'm hesitant to approve this right now.
Vicki, is that a?
So,
something you can
yeah,
answer?
this is concerning. So if a plat meets the density that's allowed, and again, it's medium-density residential is what they're proposing to rezone to. So if it meets that, and it does, they need to be 6,500 square feet or bigger, it's very difficult for the city to deny a preliminary subdivision plan. If the stipulations of approval identify that they must meet the infrastructure design criteria manual and the Rapid City Municipal Code and all the regulations and guidelines, the city doesn't have the authority to say you can't subdivide your property out. The rezone could be an issue that you might say it may not be appropriate, but I remind you, it is in compliance with the city's future land use plan. There were public hearings for this area, and it is in compliance with it. I think we put ourselves in a very challenging position if we go beyond what is actually before us today. A preliminary subdivision plan is the what if. Once the exceptions or the construction plans come in, if they don't meet the specifics of the design criteria manual and the Rapid City Municipal Code, then they can't get approval to submit a final plat. But as long as they're meeting all the rules and regulations, we can't go above and beyond what's in that code. We don't have the authority to do that.
Thanks, Vicki. Justin?
Thanks. I'll try to make it quick because we've been talking about this one for a while. But I echo kind of everybody's comments up here. I can appreciate the concerns. I get it. I bought a house on a cul-de-sac, and behind the cul-de-sacs, 3-story apartments went up. Okay, I get it. Do I love it? No. Do I hate it? No. It's fine. Not a big deal. At the end of the day, if the landowners are within the realm of what the city's master plan is and allowing, there's not much we can do. All your concerns about speeding out there and stuff, as was stated too, we don't have control over. And we hear the concerns. I think the city council should hear the concerns, and you should definitely keep voicing those. But we have to operate in this realm, as Vicki's been stating, of what's in front of us. Does it meet stipulations? Does it meet ordinances? Does it meet what is the developer doing everything they're supposed to do to comply with what we require as a city? And the answer at this point is yes. So we're not ignoring the concerns. We all have them in our neighborhoods, but at the end of the day, I think we're getting way too far outside of what this conversation needs to be with the whole Valley Drive and master plan and stuff. So although it relates to it, I think we need to kind of dial it back in a little bit, as Vicki kind of stated, and say this is what we're looking at, a rezone and a plat. You know, as far as the developer, you know, if we're going to start requiring developers to develop entire stretches of road, you know, where does that stop? I mean, they have their frontage. That's all they can be responsible for. It's like when you buy a new home in a new development, you build a sidewalk in front of your home. It goes 50 feet and stops. Are you going to make the first homeowner in the development build the entire sidewalk? It's the same principle, right? So we can't start dictating to these developers because it would stop development, frankly. I mean, that's the reality of it. So anyway, echo everybody's concerns, appreciate the comments, but I don't know if there's other comments, but I'd like to make a motion to approve per staff recommendation to get something going here.
Okay, Justin, we were considering items 4 and 5 together.
Correct.
So Justin, you're making the motion to approve item 4 for the preliminary subdivision plan per the staff recommendations and stipulations.
And 5, correct.
And then 5, the rezoning, to approve it in conjunction with that preliminary subdivision plan in 4.
Correct.
Okay. Justin made that motion, and Kurt seconded the motion. We will go to discussion on that motion. Mike, do you have a comment on the motion?
I would support that motion. Understand that we have some growing pains. We have opportunities with road development, and I hope that the city looks at that, and if we can figure out a way, I don't know if there's a simple solution, but there should be a way for that road to be developed better. It's part of growing. We're a community that's growing, and it's a great thing to have. It's a good problem to have, but going forward, I think the only option is to go forward with this as per the recommendation.
Karen?
Thank you. I just have one question or comment. If anything is built on that other property, because of the 40-unit rule, they will have to get an exception that goes to the council to exceed that. Is that correct?
The 40-unit rule is triggered by the plat.
Right.
So they could not final plat this until they secure an exception to the 40-unit rule.
Okay, that's what I understand. I just wanted to make sure of that. I think there's good comments from the citizens, and I think we've all made really good comments about how difficult this is, and it's just, as everybody said, it's part of growth, and sometimes people just don't like growth in their neighborhood, just someplace else. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ron, do you have something to add to your earlier comments?
Yeah, I just had one comment. Obviously, the apartment complexes are going to go in no matter what we like or want or anything else. But I do want you to understand, and I know this from personal experience, that road that goes up there, it does dead end in 3 different places. That road, I was raised on that hill. We moved out there in 1955. That road was a narrow gravel country road. Before that, with way fewer people up there than there is now. The only thing that's ever been improved on that road, probably since the 40s, was probably later in the 50s, they put blacktop on it. I mean, and so that road is probably 70, 80 years old with virtually no improvement other than blacktop they put on there, which is just no good. I mean, you can't even drive on the right side in most places safely. You got to drive in the middle because it's like that. So if they start putting in another 100 people, that road will not handle it. It barely handles what you need now. Plus, if they only develop in front of that, all that traffic is going to go down and be funneled right back into the same old 80-year-old road to the highway. And all that does is increase the risk of anyone that lives up there. There are people that walk up and down that road for exercise, down to the bottom of the hill, back up, children. I have 3, 4 grandchildren that come to my home and play all the time, and I'm on where I actually live is in a little different area, and it scares me. And it isn't near as much traffic as in front of where they're at. So you got to understand that isn't just another street. That's probably an 80-plus-year-old country little bitty road that has never been improved and just blacktopped. So that's, and then just taking that quarter-mile stretch and doubling the population and funneling that right back into what was already there with only one access, you're just asking for trouble.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vicki.
If I might, just as a reminder that we annexed this in with the road as it is currently today. Certainly, this was not built to any city street design standards, but we have that throughout our community as we continue to grow the boundaries of our property. There has been some great conversation today, and I did want to let those of you in the neighborhood know that we will encourage the chief of police to streamline this and listen to the comments that you made, and also we will visit with the city's traffic engineer, Steve Froman, and make him aware of the comments that you've had regarding the conditions of this road, posting of speed signs, et cetera, to just see what we can do to improve the situation, even if this development doesn't go forward.
So we have a motion on the floor on items 4 and 5 to approve the preliminary subdivision plan and associate or rezoning. Are there any more comments on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving items 4 and 5, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That puts us to 7. John, I think this is one that you pulled.
Yeah, could you put up the plot, the
Any of those you're looking for specifically?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know what the side yard setbacks are out at Red Rocks.
All right. There's going to be a 20-foot setback from Carnoustie Street or Court, because that's a sub-collector street, and then Muirfield Road, there's a 25-foot required side yard or front yard setback that abuts a street. Side yard along here, and then it appears the rear yard's going to be from a point between these two lengths there.
Where's the garage going?
The garage is going on the front of the existing garage, basically making it too deep. It'll maintain at least a 35-foot setback from Carnoustie Court, which is 15 feet over the minimum required. The applicant has indicated that they've been before their architectural board for the neighborhood association, and that they are meeting the minimum required setbacks for the low-density residential district.
Okay, thanks.
If there's no other comments on this one, I'd look for a motion.
Motion approved.
Galen made the motion to approve per staff recommendations, and Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 9. Another one of yours, John.
You know, did we get this report?
Kip?
Yeah, this is the final report. We brought the draft report to you a while back for the draft report for the railroad quiet zone assessment.
I just wish that maybe someone would email it to us prior to the meeting to see, so we can look at it, because I don't remember getting it. Did you?
This was attached to the agenda, correct? So we email you the posting that the Planning Commission meeting is ready for you to review, the Planning Commission agenda, and it's attached to that agenda, so you would have gotten that last week.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on item 9, the Railroad Quiet Zone final report? Rachel made the motion to approve. Is there a second? Mike Goller seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So that leads us to item 11.
Item 11 is a conditional use permit to allow on-sale liquor in conjunction with a full-service restaurant at 1001 East North Street. The property is zoned general commercial and is located along a commercial corridor on North Street. An aerial view of the property shows the existing restaurant. The restaurant was the former location of Hardee's near the Kmart parking lot along North Street. Future land use for the neighborhood shows mixed-use commercial, and it's also worth noting that the restaurant and the property is located along an identified revitalization corridor and next to a community activity center, the Northgate Shopping Center. East North Street is a principal arterial street identified on the city's major street plan. And this is an overview of the property itself. And it's worth noting that one of the stipulations of approval for the property is that a parking and access agreement between the restaurant and the properties to the south that are part of the shopping center will be secured before initiation of on-sale use. So there are 72 parking spaces provided in lieu of the 63 required, I believe. But those are going to be secured through the parking and access agreement between the restaurant owner and the other property owners to the south. As part of the application, there will be additional signs placed on the existing building for 124 square feet of internally lit white signage on the east side, west side, and along the north side of the building. Additionally, there is a 41-foot legal non-conforming sign that is located off premises that will be utilized by the restaurant as well. And I was going to take some site photos of the property. This is looking to the east at the existing restaurant. As I mentioned, it was the former location of the Hardee's. This is looking to the southwest across the parking lot to the shopping center. Back to the northwest along East North Street. Across the street to the north, and it's worth noting that El Sombrero Mexican Restaurant also has an on-sale liquor license. And to the northwest, the Golden Fortune restaurant also has an on-sale liquor license in the area. Back to the east along East North Street. And then directly to the south at the shopping center with the Kmart. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit to allow the on-sale liquor in conjunction with the full-service restaurant, and that is for beer and wine. with stipulations, and I believe that the applicant's consultant is also in the audience. If you have any questions for staff at this time, I'd be happy to field those, or for the applicant's consultant.
No requests right now. Anybody have a question, comment, anything on this one? All right. Galen made the motion to approve item 11 per staff recommendations. Is there a second? Rachel made the second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 12.
Good morning. This is an application to create an affordable workforce housing tax increment district located north of Country Road in between 143rd and West Nike. As you look at this property, this is the location of the boundary. And most of the construction is going to be located on the southernmost piece of the boundary. They are proposing to create 101 single-family homes with 4 apartment lots. And it's about 180 acres in size for the district. Just a real quick review of how tax increment districts work. This area here is the base valuation. The taxes generated on the base valuation of $3.4 million still go to all of the taxing agencies. Generally, when the construction is all complete, there's a new tax base. This is the amount that will be generated after the district is dissolved, and this is the amount that's actually used to pay off the proposed project plans. These are the existing tax rates. You see about 50% goes to the school district, 20 goes to the city, and 30 goes to the county. One of the reasons that affordable housing tax increment districts, which is a new classification of TIFs, is important is because with an affordable housing TIF, all of the taxes that are generated for the school district for this portion for the increment can now be allocated statewide instead of as a local assessment. So here is the proposed phasing plan. You've seen this preliminary subdivision plan last year. They have approval for phase 1. They're coming forward with phase 2 later, phase 3, and then phase 4. This generally appears to be the location of most of the regional drainage that they've identified. These 4 lots will be apartment structures. One of the things that you'll see here, this is Country Road. This is the future LaCrosse Street. They have identified costs associated with LaCrosse Street, and one of the issues that we identified during our review is that they are going to have issues constructing LaCrosse Street because this portion of the proposed right-of-way is located outside the city and the proposed district. However, because this is a crucial connection for our community, the city staff has identified that we could work on securing this potential half of the right-of-way so that we can get this constructed within this tax increment district. Of course, LaCrosse Street is not one of the proposed reimbursable expenses, but the applicants have identified that they want to get this constructed as well. So affordable workforce housing, in the 2018 legislative session, there was some new definitions added for a new classification, as I referenced. Affordable housing now can be considered a statewide expense if the first-time home buyers for all properties within the district is no more than $250,000. They, of course, have to meet some income guidelines for 2 and 3 family homes, 2 and 3 person purchasers, and then for the apartments, there's also a number that's required for a maximum rental fee. So a couple different pieces in that new legislation. The house has to sell for less than $250,000 for first-time home buyers, that purchase limit, and then also the rents have to be similar to this. And again, the reason that we want to look at identifying this as an affordable housing project according to the state classification is so that the statewide tax collection for the school district is allocated to the state, not just those property owners within the Rapid City School District. So here are the proposed costs. The TIF committee did recommend approval with the stipulation that they identify the costs for a regional detention pond that's located outside, partially outside the city limits and the boundary. So then I've adjusted the proposed costs to deduct that stuff that's ineligible. So the TIF actually proposed is about $2.6 million. We do have to look at how this proposed district meets the intent of our existing tax increment policy. I highlighted the portions that they have identified as the purpose of the TIF. They're going to stimulate economic development. They're going to stimulate private investment. And then down here, the use of the TIF is for oversizing costs for storm detention. There is a $4,600 cost for oversizing for some sewer up near Country Road. And then also they've got some professional fees and costs at the discretion of the governing body. We'll go into what those are here shortly. And then when we review a TIF application, we look at the evaluation criteria. They've identified that this area substantially impairs or arrests sound growth of our municipality based on housing accommodations. And then also 2 of the 6 required is that it's got to demonstrate that it's not economically feasible and that it's not going to provide direct or indirect assistance to a retail or service business, which is accurate because there's no commercial property within this district. The last criteria in our policy identifies that they need to meet several of the following criteria. They've identified 1. I could see maybe a couple others that they might qualify for. They would have to agree to a 5-year tax abatement. Generally, that's for apartment structures, in my understanding. And then they could also potentially meet the other one here. No, it was just number 10. My apologies. So then, as part of the staff review, we looked at how this is blighted. The TIF committee did identify the slope on the property as the blight criteria. I looked generally at the valuation of the property. This line item here is the current 40 acres that was purchased in about 2008 for $9,300, and at the end of 2017 the valuation was $20,000. It increased by 118%. And then the balance of the rest of the property, there was an increase for the overall district area at 61% increase. Specifically looked at their criterion number 9, that they identified some costs that exceed the typical or average construction cost. One of the items that they proposed is a stockpile of non-expansive granular material in the amount of $735,000. This is very consistent with costs associated throughout the whole community because we have expansive soils. The geotech report did identify that there are some areas within the proposed 40 acres that doesn't require any additional non-expansive soil, but then there are some that they will have to address with the foundation building permits. And so here is the map of the proposed public improvements. This is the non-expensive stockpile of the soil that they are proposing. They're looking at erosion and sediment control on this entire 40-acre property right here. They've got some mass grading, including the topsoil and seeding. They've got some storm pipe in a couple different locations, and then they are constructing a regional detention pond. This portion of the pond is what I had referenced about those costs outside the boundary. State law does not allow any reimbursable expenses within a TIF if it's outside the boundary. And so here is a quick recap of the proposed costs. There's the mass grading. They'd identified approximately $102,000 for the property outside the boundary. Then they're doing the entire site. There is a stockpile Generally, my understanding is this stockpile is for the construction of La Crosse Street when that comes forward. We do have an existing lift station on the northeast corner. Once that lift station is no longer needed, that will be demolished, and then they can use that for an apartment site. The next slide identifies where they anticipate the erosion and sediment control, and they identified about $10,000 that was not eligible. One of the things that we'll have to work on in the agreement is to identify how much of this area is actually outside, which portion of that outlet pipe is non-eligible, but I think we can do that through the agreement. And then also, they've identified the storm sewer pipe in these locations. Some of this may actually be considered development costs, not regional costs, but we can identify that in the agreement if necessary. And then also the non-expansive soil stockpile material. I did get information from the applicant's consultant this morning. They anticipate putting a fence around this with the builders pulling from that soil, having to have specific records, the amount that has been taken, so that each of those foundations, when it's required a building permit to certify the soil replacement during construction of the homes, can actually be verified on the amount of soil that was used. That was one of my concerns as we were looking through that, and staff as well, that, you know, how do you track that? So anyway, we do have some answer on that. So here's kind of the information about the non-expansive soil. There is a requirement during the building permit process that you have to have an inspection of the footings to ensure that, you know, the geotech report specifically for that foundation is addressed with any kind of concerns. And so the builder or the permit holder has to actually sign an affidavit saying that they've got the right soil in there and that their foundation is not going to shift. And I had identified that, you know, maybe the consultant was going to do that. At one point, there was discussion about just putting that mass or that non-expansive soil in during the mass grading, but that's not really going to address the requirement for the homes. But again, this morning, I did get confirmation that they were going to put a fence around that stockpile of non-expansive soil to make sure that only the builder associated with this particular project can have access to that soil for each of those specific foundations. And then the question is, how is this tax increment going to pay off? They propose to construct 15 new homes in that area south of Country Road. They've also got 10 homes identified in their existing Prairie Meadows, which is north of Country Road. So in year one, they're going to construct 25 homes. Year two, they're going to do another 25, and year three. In year four, they're going to do 15 homes in the 40 acres south and 5 north, and then another 30 the next 2 years, and then 11, the remaining 11 in year 7. Then they anticipate selling the apartment lots to generate approximately $27.5 million to go towards paying these project costs. Additionally, we look at the amortization schedule, and the payment amount for the loan reflects only those costs that are located inside the boundary. We had adjusted this number to accommodate what they had submitted as requested by the TIF committee to reduce the proposed amounts based on the stuff outside of the district. And so here's a couple pictures of this 40-acre site that's going to be developed with these project costs. This is from Country Road looking south. This is looking southeast. And this is looking directly west along Country Road. This is phase 1. Just to the other side is Prairie Meadows that's under construction already. And this is a picture of our existing lift station. This generally is the location of the Cross Street intersection. And then this is a picture looking from Merino Drive, which is north of Country Road looking to the south, portion of Prairie Meadows South. Another picture from Moreno Drive looking at the northwest corner of Phase 1. And this is a picture, that's not Prairie Meadows South, sorry. This is a picture of West Nike and Country Road, the intersection of that, in one of the a couple of the home sites within the proposed district that at this time was yet undeveloped. And then this is a picture of Eli Drive, which is part of Prairie Meadows. And a portion of this is inside and a portion of it is out of the proposed district. But I just wanted to give you some home sales and a view of kind of what they're proposing with the house construction. What I found within this Prairie Meadows subdivision, the homes range in sale price at $168,400 to $273,000, and the median price range is $213,000. And I point that out because it's important when you consider what's happening out in this neighborhood as opposed to what an affordable housing TIF classification has to sell for. So this clearly, the median value clearly meets that $250,000 first-time home buyer price. And then the other, a couple other questions. You know, we are restricted on a 10% maximum valuation within any county, within any TID district in our community. So at the end of 2017, Rapid City's total valuation in property was $5.2 billion. So the 10% maximum is $527 million. Today we're at $152 million worth of property valuation within TID districts, and that's only 2.88%. Again, we're allowed 10% by state law. And so then the TIF committee did make a recommendation and recommended approval. The blight that they identified was created by the slope issues on the property. They also recommended approval with some proposed reimbursement costs decreased for those expenditures outside. We addressed that. And then I had some comment that our staff review had comments. You know, although the blight was identified on the property, most all of the vacant property in Rapid City then can be considered blighted if you use those same kinds of inferences. In our opinion, the proposal does not meet state law or the TIF policy, and it doesn't necessarily meet the but-for test. However, if you concur with the TIF review committee, we do have some other recommendations that we would ask that you include in the recommendation of proposal, that after we secure an H lot for the LaCrosse Street right-of-way, that they construct LaCrosse Street within the statutory time frame. That's a 5-year time frame. That the regional drainage and stormwater expenditures that are outside the TID boundary are specifically non-reimbursable TIF costs. That the non-expansive granular material are non-reimbursable TIF expenses, but based on my conversation this morning, I would recommend that you strike that particular stipulation, and that we identify restrictive covenants on all of the TID districts so that we can ensure that this is an affordable housing TIF, and that based on the revenue projections, the TIF be limited to 15 years. With that, I know that the applicant's consultant also has a presentation, so maybe you want to hear their side before you ask or have any questions. But with that.
Thank you, Patsy. We appreciate all the information. I'd also like to note at this time that Karen is recusing herself from this item, so let the record reflect that. And I'll call up Cale McNabo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name is Cale McNabo. I own Spurley Consulting. I represent the petitioner in this matter. I do have a couple items I'd like to bring forward and recap coming out of the. Let's see, escape out of that. How do we get out of your presentation, Patsy? Run the slide projector.
Over to document cameras.
Start presentation. All right. I appreciate you bearing with me for just a moment. I would like to go back to some of the slope issues that were discussed and the concept that most of Rapid City is actually blighted according to slope. I did make this presentation at the TIF committee back in May 2nd when we got approval. And I do appreciate the input from the TIF committee on that. What you see on this exhibit are the green areas, the boundary of the subdivision. It's right there. The green areas are 0 to 5% slopes. The yellow, and that accounts for about 25 or 27% of this property. The yellow would be 5 to 10% slopes. In orange, which doesn't show up well, are 10 to 15% slopes. Everything in red is over 15% slopes. Now, I know that when you drive around Rapid City, and the top of the criteria would tell you that a 12% slope on a residential street is okay. You drive around Rapid City, 12% slope is very steep and hard to build on. The idea being that somewhere around 8% is kind of your practical maximum. If you get a lot steeper streets than that, what you end up with is lots with large retaining walls on each side, and neither you nor your neighbor is very happy with the big wall that separates your two properties. So the practical limit's around 8% on sloping streets, which takes me back to the plan that Patsy had shown you. Which is the subdivision. Let me just clear that. These are the interconnecting streets proposed. These are all generally 8% sloping streets right there. See, these roads are relatively flat on each end, but there's a lot of cross topography on this, ravines, et cetera. They're going to have to get filled in. So you're going to see a lot of, the top end of these streets are all 8%, and that's what's driven all the mass grading. So when you think about this grading plan, as Patsy showed you, you see a lot of grading on the inner lots. These are all to fill in the house sites because there's just a lot of undulating terrain. The staff report, as stated, would tell you there's a 4% crossfall on this subdivision. But that's not the case at all. You've got a lot of slopes that tip off 10, 15%, and then they're back up. And if you just take an average, it would tell you, oh, that's 4%. When you look at what the terrain actually looks like, it's very up and down. There's a lot more topography out there than you're predicting. My example that I presented at the TIF committee is when you think about using average slopes, you've got to be a little careful. The average slope from Terry Peak to Pier is 1%, but as we all know, there's a lot of things that happen along that path. So as Patsy pointed out, these are the stormwater elements that we're looking at, and we understand that there's this area of the regional detention that's outside the TIF boundary and outside the city corporate limits, so that can't be claimed. We provided that number, and in either event, our intention would be to construct the regional detention cells outfall structure and as much of the infrastructure as we can within the boundary of the TIF. But the elements that lie outside the TIF boundary, to construct them, and that would be at the owner's expense. Lacrosse Street's another example of what we plan on doing. If you think about Lacrosse Street, and I think there was some allusion in the staff report that we were trying to avoid construction on Lacrosse Street. I don't believe that's the case at all. I've planned and profiled and designed Lacrosse Street for another mile going that direction to its ultimate termination, and I did that to establish excuse me, the amount of soil that would be required to build this alignment once that right-of-way is secured. And in this grading plan, we're going to stockpile right there so we can build Lacrosse Street. So if we didn't intend to construct it, we wouldn't pile all the dirt that's going to build Lacrosse Street on the apartment lots. That's where it's going to go. So as part of the body of the TIF, what we're really looking for is, basically the expense grading, erosion sediment control, the drainage, and these regional improvements, and then the stockpile of the granular material, which happens up across the road here. And as Betsy had indicated, we do plan on gating the stockpile area, having a check-in sheet. So if you bought this lot, you would have to sign, once you had a building footprint, you get a building permit, they over-X under the footings, which, so if your footings are 4 feet in the ground and you over-X the 4 feet, you require X number of cubic or tons of that granular material. They would have to then check it out from the stockpile area, and the owners would have the key. The owners have the key to the gate. You can come in, you can get X number of yards, you assign it, and account for that material that way. And with that, that's really about all I have. I know that the ownership group is here and would like to speak to you as well.
Thank you. I've also got a speaker request form from Tony Crawford.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Before we
Vicki.
hear Tony's statements, just a reminder that you need to make a motion to continue your meeting past 9 o'clock
Oh,
if it's
good
your
point.
desire.
Motion to continue past 9 a.m. if necessary.
Galen made the motion to continue the meeting past 9 o'clock if necessary. Is there a second? Anybody?
Second.
Kurt, all right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Not a resounding bunch of ayes, though. Mr. Crawford.
Good morning. My name is Tony Crawford. My address is Post Office Box 3298, Rapid City, South Dakota 57709. And I find myself in opposition to the application for the tax increment financing district, largely because of the unresolved issues surrounding the LaCrosse Street right-of-way. It was briefly touched upon, but this has been an issue that's been before this committee and numerous committees on the future plan. This road has moved around. My personal opinion on where the road should be is that it should follow a section line. I've been in communication with the developers, and it's unresolved, but yet their request for financing assumes that the road is going to be where they're suggesting it should be. So it to a large extent, to me, is a cart ahead of the horse problem. They don't have the LaCrosse Street right-of-ways approved. They're nothing more than suggestions. So to go forward and put $800,000 plus into grading, assuming that there's going to be a road in that location, seems to me to be very premature. There have been some negotiations, but right now, under the status of the current negotiations, there has not been an agreement reached on any Lot H. No right-of-ways, there's no understandings, there's nothing between the entire, I own the entire bordering property on the east side of this development, on the south portion that's before you on the TIF request. I own that entire thing, and there has not been an agreement on the right-of-way. Then if you go further to the south, you're going to run into houses. There's other problems to the south. If you go to the north, when you get across Country Road, there's low spots and there's other LaCrosse Street right-of-way problems there as well. So this is a deal breaker, in my opinion, in that you shouldn't allow the request to be granted at this time until the LaCrosse Street right-of-way is resolved, or until there's a decision made that there is going to be no LaCrosse Street. I don't find it a foregone conclusion that LaCrosse Street is going to be where these pictures they put on the board today showed. So that's the major reason why I'm against approving this petition at this time. It's the unresolved issues involving LaCrosse Street. I don't want to get off the track too far on this blighted area. This area isn't blighted. You know, this is agricultural land, and if they want to say a great majority of land in Rapid City would qualify as blighted, then I guess there's no argument. It's just the definition of blighted that they're using that doesn't really square with the common sense definition of blighted. It's productive agricultural land. There's cows running on it right now. I think they have at least for cattle purposes. So it is productive land. And the right-of-way is the main thing that I want to stay focused on concerning my request. Now, the retention pond that they're talking about is located on a piece of property that's owned by a woman named Alice Basinger. She's a 79-year-old widow that lives in a governor's house that would be in the right-of-way or awfully close to the right-of-way of La Crosse. There would have to be some condemnation or some consent on her part to allow the road as well. But more importantly, their pictures that they're showing you on the detention pond, Alice couldn't be present this morning, but she provided me with a letter that I will leave with you, and I'd like to read, if I may. This is a letter addressed to the Department of Community Development, and this is the letter from Alice Basinger, and she owns the entire bordering property on the south. And it says, I oppose the application for tax increment financing and believe it should be denied and that you should not approve the project plan. I am the owner of the land adjacent to the south of the proposed district. It has been represented to you that a portion of a detention pond will be built as part of the project on my property. I have never been contacted by anyone concerning the project or their intended uses for my land. The area represented as part of the detention pond is actually the site of my water well. I do not intend to grant permission, grant an easement, or sell any of my land to facilitate this project. Thank you. And it's signed Alice Basinger. So that, I think that causes major unresolved questions as well. So now we have the unresolved right-of-way question. Number two, we have the unresolved retention pond question that are both such that they should cause a denial of this application. Just an aside, on this non-expansive granular material stockpile that they're talking about, excuse me, there was a projection, an overhead shown. This is my property, my barn.
Put that on the, there's an overhead projector there.
Yeah, you can just put it on that little piece of paper. There you go.
Okay, it's very blurry. But to the south, the southwest, we'll say.
You can write on the screen with this pen.
Right, I can touch this? Okay. This is my barn, right here. This is the roadway they're talking about where they're anticipating an agreement is going to be reached for a La Crosse Street right-of-way. My suggestion was that it be on the section line, which is a half mile. This line right here is a half section line. The actual section line is more down to the left of my screen. So the comment that I have about the non-expansive granular material is that the wind blows in North Rapid regularly, and 60-mile-an-hour winds are not uncommon, and they usually come out of the northwest. With my barn here, my trailer house here, this is my garage. They have this directly in between me, and we're going to see a sandblasting effect when the wind blows 60 miles an hour or more. A fence, first time I've heard about a fence was this morning, but a fence is, I believe, going to be ineffective. So, and this is an aside, and this isn't a crucial point, this isn't a deal breaker like the other two issues I've talked about, but it would be my request that they not be allowed to stockpile that non-expansive granular material directly across the road from me. They had, and you've heard comments, 180 acres of other sites, and they have, if they decide to do this, they have a place down here on the south portion where this material could be stored. This morning listening, it sounds like there's going to be two stockpiles of this material. One for foundation of houses, which would be this one, and then another one that relates to materials that's going to be needed for the construction of La Crosse Street. And again, just kind of in summary, the preparation for constructing La Crosse Street should include the securing of the right-of-ways. That should be step one. We're preparing to build a road that no right-of-way has been granted for. So those are basically my comments, is that the right-of-way is a problem on this petition. The retention, or they call it a detention pond, is a problem because it's proposed to be on somebody else's land as part of the project. And then the location of the material is really third, not very important. But the first two are very important, and standing alone would warrant a denial of the petition at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I appreciate that. If I could ask just a couple questions so we don't lose these. And this is probably for Patsy and for staff. Sorry,
No questions for me, though.
not yet, but the stockpile of the material for La Crosse isn't covered under this TIF, or is it covered?
No, it is not.
It's
somewhat, because they are grading the rest of the property, and they're grading the rest of the property to put that material along La Crosse Street for future construction.
But those costs aren't associated with that stockpile and the ultimate grading of La Crosse. Are they covered under the TIF?
The construction of La Crosse Street, no.
Okay.
But the mass grading, which includes the stockpile for that future construction, that is included.
Okay.
I would just like to thank Mr. Crawford. There are a couple things that I want to show you. This is our existing major street plan. The city has preliminary designs for La Crosse Street from East Mall north to this quarter line as part of the reconstruction and improvements that were done in Seeger. We wanted to make sure that this intersection was going to be appropriate. It does veer just a little to the east. I did hear Cale say this morning that the northern portion of La Crosse Street has been preliminary designed. And Mr. Crawford is right. The city has not approached him whatsoever to talk about any kind of right-of-way issues. That's something that we identified yesterday, that, this last week, that the city could initiate those negotiations with Mr. Crawford. If we can be successful, that'd be great. And the other thing that I neglected to mention is for that drainage pond, the applicant will have to secure that easement before they can construct that regional pond. I do have a picture of the study that was done a couple years ago for the drainage basin design plan. This is the middle section of the Box Elder drainage basin. Probably be easier if it were right side down. Generally, when you look at this is Country Road, this is 143rd, this is the proposal for La Crosse Street, and this is the regional detention pond that is the subject of part of the discussion this morning. This does incorporate two subbasins. Their numbers are 553 and 555. This particular subbasin is about 77 acres. This one up here is about 40. It takes into just a little more. This subbasin drains a little more than the 40 acres within this proposal. But we do have this pond identified in our drainage basin master plan as a necessity for this region. So there are just a couple clarifications I wanted to throw in there. There is a regional pond that's identified in our long-range plan for our basin, our regional drainage issues, and we do have a potential alignment for La Crosse Street. And Mr. Crawford is right. This location has shifted several times the last 4 or 5 years. Currently, we have it identified with the preliminary design, generally in the existing location that's shown on our major street plan. And we will have to work with Mr. Crawford to secure that right-of-way. If that doesn't happen within that 5-year time frame that I identified, then potentially La Crosse Street will not be constructed until a future point in time.
Thank you, Patsy. I've got a couple other speaker requests. Are there any questions on the last speaker for Patsy before we lose them? Seeing none, Brett Estes, if you'd like to speak to this.
My name is Brett Estes. I live at 7820 Norsman Lane, and I'm one of the members in this project. Don't have a lot that I can add to it. This is an effort on our part to get some workforce housing in Rapid City. Yeah, as you know, a lot of that's going away to Somerset and Box Elder. And we've worked pretty close with the builders. We've got some nice size lots for some nice houses. If you've been through the development that we've done so far, it's a nice area. And our streets are nice and curvy. Nobody's driving 80 miles an hour, so that's good. There was one thing said that the valuation of this land is at $20,000 an acre. We paid $8,000 for it, so I'm not exactly sure where that valuation comes from, but that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Benny, if you'd like to speak. Sam's good. Okay. Now it's up to the commission. Questions, comments from the commission? Thoughts? Vince, do you have one?
No, I'd just like to make a motion to deny the application as per staff recommendations.
Okay, Vince made the motion to deny the application. Is there a second for that motion? Galen seconded the motion. Rachel? Yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to deny. Galen, would you like to add some comments?
Yeah, it's just too many unknowns for me. I'm not real comfortable with this using the slope as the main reason for this, as was pointed out, and the unknowns with where La Crosse Street's going to end, the landowner issues. It's just doesn't check the boxes for me, so not really in support of this method of moving the project forward. And again, I kind of understand how the TIF works. There's an appeal process, so pretty good chance this can always be appealed, and city council can tackle this later anyway, so that's all.
Further questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Any? Rachel?
Yeah, sorry, I changed my mind. Yeah, I think TIFs could possibly be a really good, tool to help with affordable housing, but I just don't know, a lot of Rapid City actually does have pretty steep grading, and I understand your comment about averages. That's a very good comment and very good point that averages don't always give you a good idea of what's actually going on. And when we live in the hills, and a lot of, my house is a really steep, sort of site, and a lot of houses are. And then on top of that, expansive soils are kind of everywhere. So if we want to make the argument that expansive soils and steep grades are a reason that is holding us back from having affordable housing, then I think we do need to address that. But I just don't know if taking from school districts and the police department and all the different places where this money should be going, because there will be people using those services after these are built. I don't know if taking from those departments and those services is really the correct mode of action. I think it needs to be addressed. I just don't think TIFs are the answer. So that's my comment, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Further comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to deny item number 12, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. I think it was just me. So the motion, item number 12 is denied. Any discussion items or staff items today? All right, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Rachel made the motion to adjourn. And Mike Goller seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye.